Good evening, everyone. This is Joe Atwell with Jan Irvin, and we're going to be discussing many interesting things tonight. We were hoping that Professor Darrell Hamamoto would join us, and he might come on during the show. So if that happens, don't be alarmed. It's all.
Yeah, he had messaged me last night that he would be in here at 4:55, so I'm not sure where he is. I just sent him an email. I've not heard anything back. But Joe has made some very interesting discoveries that link directly to research that I had already done. And so we're excited to dive into that as well. So if Darrell does join us, we've got even more to offer. But it's going to be quite the exciting show today anyway.
Right. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about was basically the destruction of the Black family in America. And it really began with the Great Society programs of Lyndon Baines Johnson. They were talked about in the 60s and really started to get implemented in the 70s. All of the statistics of the African-American family were going in the right direction from the Civil War right up to the point where the Great Society program started having effect. And from that exact point in time, all the statistics went negative. In other words, things like single moms, crime, homicides, drug use, everything started to collapse. And as it turns out, this wasn't just a catastrophic blunder. This, in fact, was a plan. It was brought about by the same people and for the same purpose that produced the counterculture. The counterculture was to basically white middle-class youth what the Great Society program was for the African-American family. And so one element that really pushed the separation of the Black family along rapidly was an article that appeared in Ms. Magazine called Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. It was on the cover of Ms. Magazine. It was the cover story. And the book was purportedly written by a Black feminist.
Article, yeah.
Yeah. And it was written by a Black feminist. Actually, it is a book, but
it is, okay.
This magazine did excerpts from it and promoted it dramatically. I mean, it was their centerpiece. Gloria.
Got it. I didn't realize it was also a book. That's even better.
Right. Well, anyway, so there was this Black feminist, supposedly named Michelle Wallace, who claimed to have written the book. She came out of nowhere. She was in her early 20s and somehow was able to cobble together this basically hit piece on Black men, which, was really quite bizarre.
Now, just a second, Joe. Darrell has just joined us, but Darrell needs to turn on his audio and his video. There was a green button when you logged in, Darrell, to turn on your audio, and you also need to hit the camera button at the bottom left.
Okay.
Okay, I hear your audio. Make sure your camera's on at the bottom left there.
Alrighty.
There you go. All right, so Joe is telling us an interesting story about some research he just did.
Well,
okay.
Anyway, this actually was inspired by research done by Darrell Hamamoto, the gentleman who just joined us. Because Darrell had alerted me to the possibility that the Japanese internment camps had been centers of anthropologic research, and that then that research was used or misused or used with malevolence in the Great Society programs, which then would make perfect sense. But Darrell, I'm just so glad you're here. Can you do you want to just help us understand what happened with the Japanese internment camps and the relationship to the Great Society programs? Where I'm going with all this, what I was talking about before was just how the Great Society program shattered the black families in America. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. But I really wanted to just basically, first of all, just profile your work and let you explain to us what really happened in the Japanese internment camps in World War II.
Okay, I do agree with you that there is a direct line. It's a wavy line, but it's a direct line nonetheless that connects the experiments, the social science, anthropological, sociological, psychological experiments of this captive population of Japanese Americans during World War II, a direct line that connects that with the subsequent demolition of the African American family and, of course, the community at large. And at that point in the Great Society, the African American community was really, really pulling it together. And they had a robust middle class. They had professionals, teachers, attorneys, physicians living amongst everyday people. So what happened is that even prior to World War II, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the ONI, which, by the way, Richard Nixon was an ONI vet, I guess you could call him. But the Office of Naval Intelligence had a very, very special interest of the Japanese American community in the Los Angeles area. And they infiltrated through, and this is very important information because we're seeing this today in 2015, but they infiltrated the Japanese American community and its organizations, and they identified the leadership. See, they're very interested in who the community leaders are so they can decapitate the leadership, and then the rest of the people will follow their control system. So they went in there and they formed their own organization out of the blue. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? We have ISIS today. And they call that the Japanese American Citizens League. And today we have similar types of ethnic-specific organizations like La Raza and Mecha, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Groups like that supposedly represent the specific group. So what happened is that they took an inventory, by the way, through the help of elaborate new technology developed by IBM, the Hollerith cards that they used to catalog Jews and other undesirables in Nazi Germany, IBM. They first did that on the Japanese Americans through a census program. So they had all the data on them, and all they needed to do is get them into that little captive, there were 10 centers, but get them into that captive space and get the medical anthropologist to study them, the psychologist. And they even brought in graduate students within the Japanese American population itself. People who had been studying it, for example, at Berkeley, were brought in by this woman, Dorothy Swain Thomas, as part of her research team. And Joe, the result of this were two classic books. One was called The Spoilage, which is about the roundup and the evaluation of this captive population. And the other one was The Salvage, which is about the aftermath, the resettlement process. And it stated in Dorothy Swain Thomas's proposal, her original proposal itself, she said that this social science information, this data, this study will be very, very useful to us in the post-war period when we see large populations all over the world being manipulated and moved around and assimilated or inserted artificially, like we're seeing in much of Western Europe and the United States, right, with the so-called Syrian refugee crisis. So this had long-lasting relevance and worth. They got the security people, the corporations, the military that funded all this research, they got a lot of bang for their buck from Dorothy Swain Thomas, who, by the way, was married to, by this guy. I forgot his first name. He's a early sociologist by the name of Thomas and Zanecki, who, that was one of his partners. He was a prominent sociologist in his own right that had contributed a great deal to developing what later developed into these really elaborate social control, social engineering programs that we see today. So these were sociologists. These are social scientists. And the bad news is that they're still doing this under the guise of the Human Terrain Project. There's anthropological intelligence that's being done in the throughout the Near East or the Middle East. A lot of it was carried forth earlier during the Vietnam War with the Phoenix program and related offshoots of that. And of course, the domestic branch of that, and this is where Jan's expertise kicks in. The domestic end of that would be programs like MK Ultra, the quote unquote psychedelic revolution, and other forms of cultural and social, not necessarily just engineering, but steering. Because a lot of these movements start organically, but once they start organically, then they're infiltrated and they're steered in a certain direction.
Well, and speaking of that, so Joe was just about to get into more of his discovery. And so, Joe, you should pick that up from there, and then I'll fill in the gaps behind this researcher and her direct connections into MK Ultra, as Darrell just suggested before he knew where we were going.
Is this Dorothy Swain Thomas?
No, it's not.
Okay.
But this is you'll be shocked nonetheless.
Good. I like pleasant shocks.
Well, anyway,
Light voltage shocks.
right. I mean, first of all, thank you, Darrell, for that information. That's fantastic.
We can't see your face there, Joe.
And it's very clarifying. Very clarifying for people to hear this. Very, very important. And so after I had my discussions with you, I started to look at the Great Society program basically through the lens that you had given. And what I saw was, this catastrophic statistical cliff for the African-American community, which couldn't possibly be just bad, science. Then this could only be deliberate. I mean, if it was bad science, they would have reversed it. So this must have been a program. And I looked at, well, what were all the elements that broke apart the Black family? And one of the key things I found was an article that appeared in Ms. Magazine. And Ms. Magazine is now, I think, completely outed as just a CIA rag. Gloria Steinem is no longer even salvageable as someone who isn't a CIA agent. She's admitted it. And in fact, her history in the CIA is now becoming a subject of real serious scholarship. So hopefully this will all fall apart quickly. But in any case, Ms. Magazine published this article called Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. It was written by this Black woman who'd come out of nowhere named Michelle Wallace.
Oh, yes.
No one knew anything about her. No one understood how she'd been able to write it. She then, in subsequent interviews, admitted that basically she had been breastfed and steered by a woman who was an editor for Ms. Magazine named Joyce Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Now let me jump in here.
Jan can take it from here. Go ahead.
This is good stuff. Good stuff.
As it turns out, there was this character that got popularized during the late 2000s by the name of Daniel Pinchbeck. Now, Daniel Pinchbeck is the one who became the poster boy for the whole 2012 end of the world scenario. And he wrote a book called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and all of this new age nonsense about the end of the world in 2012. Now, as it turns out, this guy, Daniel Pinchbeck, and he was working with Sting, and of course, Sting and the police were, Stuart Copeland, his father was Miles Copeland, one of the founders with Gregory Bates into the CIA. But Daniel Pinchbeck's mother is a woman by the name of Joyce Johnson Glassman.
No.
And so this woman is apparently the same Joyce Johnson or Joyce Glassman who birthed this same Daniel Pinchbeck, who became the poster boy of 2012, but his mother is the one who is essentially responsible for the destruction of the Black family.
Wow. Are you recording this, by the way, Jan?
The network is recording it.
Okay, great. Okay.
We're going out live.
All right.
Interestingly, Joyce Johnson, and I'm sure you know this, Sean, actually entered the American media as the girlfriend of Jack Kerouac.
Right. Now, let me get some background on them. Now, she was one of these beatnik writers from Greenwich Village. She was actually part of the Greenwich Village team of MKUltra. She was lovers with Jack Kerouac, and CIA assassin William Burroughs also lived there under their roof with little Daniel Pinchbeck running around. And another CIA boy known for his corruption that I've already exposed was a guy by the name, you might have heard of him, Darrell, Allen Ginsberg. And Allen Ginsberg, his uncle was, Oscar Janiger, I believe, was his uncle. And, of course, Janiger was another CIA operative working out of L.A. doing human LSD experiments, etc. So now we have the little nexus between the Greenwich Village MKUltra team and this whole, destruction of the black family. And then Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs then go off to found the Naropa Institute, where they promote CIA agents like, you may have heard of this CIA agent, Darrell. He goes by the name 14th Dalai Lama.
Well, the thing that
I thought he was a reincarnation of the, whoever. No.
Well, he's been CIA since the 50s, and he's directly promoted by these CIA organizations. But he was funded by the CIA. The CIA helped to create his army in Tibet, etc., to fight against the so-called communists, even though he's an admitted Marxist and communist.
Well, I do know about the program where the Central Intelligence Agency brought in large numbers of Tibetans to the U.S. for counterinsurgency training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's part of that cohort, probably.
Right. And he's exactly that cohort. And anyway, nice little tie in there.
Right, I just want to interject. I thought I remembered the name Joyce Johnson because I read a book by her, an autobiography, years ago, which is about her relationship with Jack Kerouac. So she was one of those beatniks hanging around in the village. Is that right?
That's right.
Where were they staying, at the Warwick Hotel with the Burroughs?
I don't know where they were. Burroughs and Kerouac and Ginsberg were apparently, from what I've also been able to gather, were staying at their place, and little Daniel Pinchbeck was running in between their ankles and stuff. And then, of course, William Burroughs, in 1956, in a French magazine article, published that the 2012 or that the Maya calendar was actually a system of social control. So then Daniel Pinchbeck, who grew up in this same household with them, becomes the poster boy of the 2012 Maya, native revivalist movement.
What I think is really clarifying is that you can see how the family was focused upon for destruction. It's very clear. You can see that in the Japanese internment camps, they deliberately disassembled the families. There were anthropologists everywhere. They had the group that Darrell mentioned, but David Price, he claims that there were 3 different organizations of anthropologists that had been hired to study the Japanese American internees. And they had these names like Community Analyst Section, War Authority, right, and then the Bureau of Sociologic Research, that I believe would have been the one that no, that was another one. And then the one that Dorothy Thomas was the JERS, the Japanese American Evacuation Resettlement Study. So anyway, you had just an ant farm of anthropologists crawling all over these things, studying what was going on. They had broken up the family in many instances in the internment camps. So obviously one of the elements that they were studying was the effect of this. Now when you go forward and you see the Great Society programs and you see the promotion of it by Ms. Magazine and the promotion of feminism, of course, right?
Who was the publisher of Ms.? Was that Clay Felker or?
Gloria Steinem was the editor. I don't know who.
Steinem had a money man that sponsored her. I forgot his name.
It'll come to me in a second. I know I actually have that date.
Was it Uncle Sam?
Indirectly, yes.
But anyway, if you look at this, you'll have you'll see that. So you have the family being destroyed in the Japanese internment camps. You have the family being destroyed by the Great Society programs, with Joyce Johnson Glassman helping to promote this Black Macho, really a terrible hit piece on the African American male. And then the same family, the same group then is also working the other side to destroy the white middle class families.
Now get this. So Daniel Pinchbeck, at his promotion of psychedelic drugs all over the country, also promotes polyamory and free love and free sex. And he says that, you're only attracted to someone for 3 years and then you need to go off onto another relationship. So, of course, this doesn't build for anything long-term, no long-term family values or family structure or anything. And so this, again, is, the attack on the family, white family, middle-class family in general, again, being promoted, generationally through Pinchbeck and his mom, Joyce Glassman. Of course, Pinchbeck means fool's gold.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So anyway,
And you notice that cuckoldry is being aggressively pushed in the popular culture right now, particularly in that really, really awfully written novel, The 50 Shades of Grey, and the even worse film, the film version of it. It's about cuckoldry.
yeah.
We're seeing that being promoted, not just in films, but there's a whole separate genre within adult entertainment.
I agree. It's all, and the transvestite is being promoted too.
That's part of it. The GLBTQ, IA, and whatever initials that they keep adding is very much a part of that breakdown that's orchestrated. And of course, the people who are involved in these movements are typically sincere and well-meaning, but they don't realize that they're being used as
Absolutely.
We should clarify that because we're not homophobes here or necessarily against people who are pursuing
one thing that is clear is that homosexuality is eugenics, because obviously homosexuals do not procreate, and that is the end of their family line.
Right. It's like I'm often asked about Edward Bernays, and you can see how seminal he was to the destruction that was going on in the 60s. You'll have to look at that article Jan and I wrote, Manufacturing the Deadhead, but you can see this direct relationship in all of these different areas that Bernays was involved with, and one of them was integration. He had set up, actually, the NAACP. That was his organization. And so the question is, well, are you opposed to integration? But this is the wrong question. The question is simply, can you use integration as a weapon, as a weapon? And this is the point, is that, yes, you can see all these beneficial aspects to it, and that's how it's sold. That's how it's given. It's sort of like the acceptance of transvestites and gay people. I mean, but that isn't how the oligarch who's setting up these social structures is thinking. He's not thinking benefit. What he's thinking is how I can shatter what exists. And so in this instance, it's a weapon. And that's really the transition that people have to make, is from understanding it just as a beneficial social construct to something that can actually be used to damage.
And to update this idea, this integration project that was put in motion with the so-called Great Society, today in 2015, they know that integration has a historical resonance that not everybody's going to buy these days. So, and I'm alerting all the subscribers here, all the viewers, the audience, the latest meme is self-segregation.
Yeah.
So it's like on you, if you don't want to integrate, you are self-segregating. And there was an article today about this Asian American kid, this punky kid who's at Harvard, who had incredible advantages going there, saying, well, I feel like I've been handicapped and crippled by self-segregating amongst a lot of high-achieving Asian Americans who grew up in Saratoga, California, and I'm at Harvard. Please.
Yeah.
So
and we see the whole thing with the transhumanists now. The Getty Museum in L.A. is piggybacking this whole thing, and their new keyword is rebel, and they've got the extended human or something like that is their new marketing term for transhumanism. Hi, CIA. Hi. And so, this is all, we're seeing the remarketing of all of this stuff all over again. They've got to constantly come up with new terms to remarket it, make it the new cool thing to do. But it's always the degradation of society. It's always the attack on the family and the middle class. Mm-hmm. It's always the promotion of this neo-feudalism stupidity. And then, all of this stuff affects all of us. The level of incompetence that we have to deal with on a daily basis out there now because of the intelligence community's dumbing down of society affects everyone, including the intelligence community. And rather than uplifting people and allowing everyone to see real solutions, the psychopaths want to keep the control for themselves, so they spend trillions of dollars to dumb everyone down to create this artificial stupidity in society that naturally is not there. But if people were as dumb as they want us to believe, they wouldn't need all of these efforts. They wouldn't need Steinem. They wouldn't need Pinchbeck. They wouldn't need Leary. They wouldn't need Joyce, Johnson, Glassman. They wouldn't need any of this stuff. And, so then we see the real agenda come in it's obviously a terrible misnomer, intelligence community. But, we're starting to see the real agenda, and the intelligence community is beginning to be seen for what it really is.
Now, their big problem is that there has evolved in a very short span of time a community of independent thinkers, scholars, some of them within academia, but most of them outside of it, which gives them a much fresher and accurate and less accountable to funding sources controlled by intelligence and the military and corporations. So they have a big fight on their hands because the numbers of people who are awakening up to this system of control, intelligence, miseducation, the damaging of our health, all of it, the social engineering, that that audience is growing by leaps and bounds. And I don't want to sound cocky going into 2016, but I think the genie's out of the bottle. And the people who think that they're going to get their way by promoting what they call transhumanism, really it's posthumanism that they're promoting, getting back to your idea about eugenics, they have a big fight on their hands because too many people know by now.
Yeah, well, I agree. And those who know need to go to gnosticmedia.com and click on the donate button up on the top.
Absolutely.
So continue exposing this stuff and, giving the intelligence community as hard a time as possible.
Yeah. I wanted to just mention another little bonbon that when I was doing this research this week that I came across. There were two brothers that were at the Japanese internment camp. They were anthropologists. One of them was named Marvin, I believe, but their last name was Oppler. Both of them were named Oppler. And what's fascinating is that they actually end up in MK Ultra, but it's how they get to MK Ultra. So they are studying the and of course they have these cover stories. One of them is saying, "Oh, this is a terrible thing, and the Japanese are really suffering." Of course, he never basically talks about the whole anthropologic science that's going on here. He just has this nice little cover story. But anyway, so Oppler then ends up working for the Human Ecology Fund. The Human Ecology Fund.
Well, the Human Ecology Fund was part of MK Ultra.
Exactly right. You see. And so now you can get with Oppler, with the Oppler brothers, who then are working with the Human Ecology Fund. You've got an absolutely clear-cut transition from the research that was going on in the Japanese internment camps, the research that was going on post-World War II in Palo Alto, and then the destruction of the family en masse. The African-American community, they hit the white middle class, they hit the Japanese-American community. There was some maniac and really criminally evil individual or group came up with this idea of how they could shape society to be without families so they could have an easier mob to be able to control.
Now, Joe, there's another piece of scholarship that even predates the spoilage and Dorothy Swain Thomas. You probably have come across it in your own independent research, independent of me. But it's The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. Yeah. And that was authored by the anthropologist Ruth Benedict. And that research was conducted in the Japanese American concentration camp that was meant to psychologically profile the Japanese enemy. So methodologically, it was flawed because they were talking about Americans. But the point remains is that she was one of the architects of this breakdown and destruction, especially when you consider that her prized pupil and lover, reportedly, was none other than Margaret Mead. So take it from there, Jan.
Well, of course, Margaret Mead was the wife of CIA founder, hi CIA, Gregory Bateson. And Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson were both involved in the Macy conferences. Of course, the Macy conferences were the key organizational effort behind MKUltra, which was founded by two primary groups, the Human Ecology Fund and the Geschichter Fund, and there was probably others as well. But it's a very small, naked little circle in the intelligence world of sub-intelligence personnel.
Getting back to your point, what's fascinating is that if you then go forward, if you actually then go forward from Mead's connections into MKUltra and the Macy conference, MKUltra then developed their Handbook of Torture. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it actually gives a distress rating for things like suffocation, electric torture, burning of body parts, forced extraction of teeth, racking, stretching of the body, just beating with fists, hanging by hands and feet. These are all given distress rating. They're actually studied all of these things. And then even psychological manipulations, like sham executions, witnessing torture of close ones. This is coming right out of MKUltra. This expertise in this is all under the auspice of interrogation. But in my opinion, it goes right back to the sword and the chrysanthemum. I think that what you're looking at is basically it isn't just the development of torture techniques. It's the chronicling of the different aspects of torture, of what they can do with them. They're trying to build up a science basically of how to control people, how to interrogate them, how to shape them, how to psychologically manipulate them.
Mm-hmm. And if I could push back the timeline even further, and this is speculative at this part, I'm just throwing it out to you gentlemen so that your intelligences can work on this hypothesis of mine. But a lot of this is really reminiscent of the Inquisition that was led by the Vatican, the Roman Church, and the Society of Jesus. Now, we know that people like Alan Dulles, the Dulles brothers, were Knights of Malta. They were Jesuits, and we know that the early OSS and CIA was most of them were recruited, not most, but many were from Jesuit schools. So I'm wondering to what extent the Jesuit interpenetration of the intelligence agencies, specifically the OSS and the CIA, helped to inform or to form the foundation of what later, as Joe mentioned, became rationalized as a science of control, of torture, and of confession, and of guilt, and of self-policing, and a notion of sort of a diffuse sin that you're guilty of, and it needs to be purged, it needs to be identified and tortured out of you.
Personally, I see more influence by Judaism and also by the Fabian socialists, and then outerlying groups by from MI6 on the CIA. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you see there, Joe.
Well, it's a critical question, and I do think the Jesuits were compromised from the very beginning. I think that the origins of them are very mysterious. They have, connections into secret societies from the very beginning, actually predating Loyola's, kind of construction of it. His real name was Lopez, which is often a name of Marrano Jews. So people have wondered about his actual ethnicity. But I think, first of all, I'm in complete agreement that the science of Inquisition that developed the torture stuff was part of the science that MK Ultra was using. There was obviously a flow into it. But what I would say to the question of, well, who really is running the show at this point? We shouldn't guess at this. What we should do is get DNA evidence. I really want, you talk about Alan Dulles. Well, the Dulles family have connections, of course, into Skull and Bones. I don't know if you know this, Darrell, but the Dulles family actually literally owned the Skull and Bones. It's a corporation. They evidently sold it on the day of the Bay of Pigs invasion, which is, I'd like to get to the bottom of some of that. But so the Dulles family has background into these Skull and Bones members. And if you look at, if you look at the day of the Bay of Pigs, you have Kennedy on one side, and then you have about 8 different people who are in communication with Dulles, and they were operating all this. All of these guys are Skull and Bones. They all have this background in this weird little Yale eating society.
Well,
but my point is that you have secret societies. There's no question that there is secrecy because there is malfeasance. Something is going on in back of the secrecy. I don't believe anything about ethnicity until I get the evidence. I don't believe anything of what anyone tells me about what's going on in back of these secret oaths and whatnot until we get actual data on what people are saying. But the first thing we got to do is we have to test these people. We got to find out who Dulles is related to, what his ethnicity is, what are the family, what is the relationship between the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds?
Now,
what are we dealing with? Is it a big family? Is it a whole bunch of different ethnicities and different families and different oligarch perspective, or is it a single group that lies about it that doesn't reveal its real identity and simply puts out stories to the public?
Now, I don't know enough to speak to this, but there's an independent scholar by the name of Lorraine Moret, who's an environmental scientist, and she's uncovered some pretty incredible research into these bloodlines. And her working hypothesis is that most of these groups are informed by ancient, what today would be called Iranian bloodlines, who migrated throughout the Mediterranean area, and of course, Venice, and then through the British Isles, and of course, probably migrated through the Netherlands, and of course, to the New World, the United States and Latin America. And I think this is a particularly fruitful line of inquiry. It's a hypothesis at this point, but she has looked at the DNA evidence. There are all these reports, and I agree with you that a lot of, including independent research, a lot of it goes on hearsay. Some of it has ossified into dogma, but I think we really need to look at some of the hard science, including DNA. And fortunately, that's one of the great outcomes of the Human Genome Project, is it's yielded a lot of research talking about the migration and the movement of different groups through human civilization. So if we get
give a little data, because I couldn't agree more. First of all, absolutely right. This is what we need to do, is we need to bring science into it. And we have the capacity to do it in one component with the DNA evidence. And I'm just going to give you this little data because I think it might amuse you. Madonna now travels with a DNA cleanup crew.
Uh-huh.
And I have heard from other people who have given me rumors. Madonna is outed. This is clear. This is known, and it's basically been demonstrated that she has some people who are specialists in DNA cleanup who come after her. I think that, and now I've been told by people who follow my work and who give me information, they've cited other individuals, celebrities, right, who are all now doing this DNA cleanup business. And what I'm betting is we're going to see a lot more of this in the future, because I think that a lot, particularly destructive, like Miley Cyrus, Madonna, different kinds of people that have really helped take culture off a cliff. I'm going to bet that there is a family connection, a DNA connection. And it's a hypothesis, but I think it's one we can actually test.
Now, I want to add to the skull and bones bit here. Of course, in my first article on Wasson, I exposed all of the direct connections between him and Skull and Bones and Wasson's direct boss, Henry P. Davidson at J.P. Morgan Bank, senior partner, and was regarded as Morgan's personal emissary. Davidson created and funded Time Life magazine. He was Skull and Bones. Another one was Dwight Morrow, who helped finance Time Life. Henry Luce was Skull and Bones being initiated in 1920. And then 1946, Davidson and Luce made C.D. Jackson the head of psychological warfare, vice president of Time Life. And of course, Time Life helped Wasson promote Magic Mushrooms, Life Magazine, May 13, 1957, all that. And then there's several other people there. Frederick's son, Daniel P. Davidson, also became a banker in Skull and Bonesman in 1949 and headed United States Trust. And then another Skull and Bonesman behind the establishment of Time Life was Britton Hayden, who worked with Davidson, Luce, and Morrow in setting up the organization. Hayden was also initiated into Skull and Bones in 1920. And then Wasson also worked with Averell Harriman at the Council on Foreign Relations, which, of course, anybody can go to Princeton's Mudd Library and see all of the documents, the CFR documents there between Averell Harriman and Wasson. And Averell Harriman was initiated to Skull and Bones in 1913 and was a director. And then, so we've got, 6, 7 more Skull and Bones personnel folding into the intelligence community and into all of this degradation of society.
Now, Jan, you have documented those connections in previous articles, and this information is now moving into the larger sphere of the general scholarship. I wonder if you could comment upon our more recent find, because we know about the Yale connection, we know about Yale, but how about another institution in Connecticut of higher learning, that is Wesleyan University? Because we're finding out today in 2015, there's a whole network of people from Wesleyan University who are creating this culture of fragmentation and degradation.
Well, and Wesley University, but also the Wesleyan College, the women's college there, I'm seeing a lot of overlap with that. Mm-hmm. And Wasson's mother was a member of that. Okay. I haven't tracked as much on Wesley University as I should. It is in the database.
Well, this is something that your audience, our fellow researchers out there, can start looking into.
And Wesleyan University, the one connection I have in the database on Wesleyan University is Theta Nu Epsilon, and that ties, drum roll, directly to the 322 Order of Skull and Bones. So and I didn't know that before I just pulled it up and looked. So, perfect timing.
But yeah, the point is that Skull and Bones, it's part of the historical record now. I think this article that appeared in, I think it was the Hollywood Reporter, about this professor who's been teaching film studies at Wesleyan University since 1969. I think that's an incredible find for 2015. People like Michael Bay, and you were the one who found this article, and one of your subscribers did, about him working in close collaboration with the Central Intelligence Agency on his current movie.
Right.
The one that he's working, the project that he's working on.
Right. And so that was, I posted that to Facebook just yesterday. Mm-hmm. And one of the quotes from that article states, so if you're watching a flashy Hollywood thriller starring, say, a young, exceptionally handsome Colin Farrell as a well-groomed CIA badass, you can safely assume that the agency consulted on it in the service of image control. So what that quote there implies is that it's not just Michael Bay in this one film, but I have been calling the CIA jokingly the Central Entertainment Agency for about 8 months now, because when I was at Princeton last February, in fact, I called Joe one day after I had gotten out of I forget if it was the Firestone Library, the Mud Library, and I called Joe and I said, Joe, the CIA is just all over the whole entertainment thing. It's all entertainment. It's all the books, movies, the playwrights, all of this stuff. That is the CIA's thing. So when you publish a book, you're supposed to be one of the boys in the intelligence community. The CIA likes to control the conversation, so they don't like outsiders like me or Joe coming along and publishing something.
There is an academic book called Hollywood and the CIA, and there is some scholarship that exists. It's not known to the public, though. The public is going to go and see Star Wars or Spectre or something like that, purely for its entertainment value. So
right, and not have any idea that George Lucas was a major Satanist or is, and worked with Timothy Leary, and he was a part of the whole Altamont, Meredith Hunter fiasco and all of that. And we don't. It's possible that was staged also.
I wanted to give Darrell a kind of some feedback on your comment. You talk about, well, it's out of the bag now, and there's too many people, and there's new information coming forward, and Jan actually shared with me a correspondence from one of his subscribers, I believe, about a comment on research that Jan and I had done on the Life magazine cover, the one that details Gregory Watson.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Right, and on the cover, you have the description of Watson's trip, strange visions in the Mexican desert on mushrooms. And it's in a black box, which is inset from the color picture. But there's another purported article that's referenced with 3 words. It says teenage allowances, right? Now, this is just an absolutely clear-cut example of neuro-linguistic programming. They're putting out the information about the beginning of the psychedelic revolution, and in the inserted black box, they've also got this expression, teenage allowances. And what was pointed out by Andrew, who sent the information to Jan, was, there it is, teenage allowances. Show that to Darrell so you can see it.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's giving me a hard time sharing here, but there it is.
Is that Wasson in the bowler hat?
No, that's not Wasson.
That looks like Keenan Wynn or Buster.
That's a cowardly lion.
That's Bert Lahr, right?
Right. So it says discovery of mushrooms that cause strange visions, and then teenage allowances. Now finish the story on this, Joe.
No. What about Bert Lahr, though? I think that's a really important iconic image of him. That the comic.
He's peeking through the pines, which is all symbolic and all this.
Peeking through the palms, which are
palms, yes.
Break it down for me here.
Well, it's the symbol of the Messiah. In other words, the Messiah comes with palms, like Palm Sunday, for example, in the Christian religion, or the palms on the coins that in the first century in Eretz Israel. So the palms are, have religious symbols. Bert was, he's also a big Freemason. But anyway, so teenage allowances, what was pointed out by Andrew, that Wasson explicitly states that his daughter, 18, Marcia, he gives her age as 18, that she joined Wasson and his wife in a private mushroom eating experience, and then they actually showed pictures of teenagers involved in the native ritual. So that, in other words, they backed up the teenage allowance neuro-linguistic programming suggestion on the cover with an actual description of a teenager taking psychedelic drugs and pictures of it. And of course, remember, Wasson is MKUltra subproject 58. This whole thing is just a hallucination. There's nothing real about this. This is, now that the primary documents have been exposed, everyone can bloody well look at them and see that Wasson was being paid by MKUltra for this whole process, you see. So this is a really good example, Darrell, of what can happen once the genie gets out of the bottle. People can start, because no one can see everything, all these little details, but all together if once we start working as a group, we can really go through this and find all of the clarification and evidence and details that we need to really make sure that the case is just completely overwhelming and that the public will realize, we've got to do something about this mess.
And this historical information provides the foundation for the vital research that's necessary for 2015, 2016, so that we can better identify ongoing contemporaneous projects that are much more subtle, much more difficult to detect because it's happening as we're living and breathing here. Absolutely. And I think given this background, people can become more sensitized to recognizing these programs because they keep running the same plays in general under different guises, or they put different faces up there, or they manufacture, as you put it, new lifetime actors like Angelina Jolie for the new millennium, and on and on. But once they have the conceptual grid and sort of the theoretical basis, as you've outlined through this history, I think more and more people are going to be better equipped to identify the big head trips that are being imposed on them right in today.
Well, if you look at black propaganda, it has to be the victim must be unwitting. He cannot understand what's going on. If you know that you're being fooled, the technique doesn't work. Black propaganda requires the subject, the victim, to give his or her trust to the person who's doing the damage.
Now, the reason why I say that the grassroots, or what I call organic intellectuals, are picking up on it is because I've been looking at a lot of YouTube presentations by African-American thinkers, people like Steve Coakley, who identified the secret society amongst upper middle class African-American professionals called Boule, which are related to the Greek societies. You've heard of this, Boule?
I have.
Okay, so there's people like that, and there's, of course, the better-known Professor Griff, but those are just two of many, many people who are going on YouTube and are able to break it down a lot easier. Because if there's any one group, as you've already alluded to, there's any one group that's been subjected to PSYOPs and social engineering, it's African-American people.
Well, we all have, but
they know it's like
the hardest first, I would say.
Yeah. And most aggressively. But yeah, it's now generalized for the population at large.
Now they're after Japanese and white folks.
Yes, and also Latinos are a big control group right there because they're still very much wed to family and cultural traditions that the social scientists haven't been able to break down yet.
Yeah, there's a black organization in Los Angeles that I'm hoping to speak to. I had an appointment to speak to them, and I couldn't make it, and now we're trying to reestablish it. But I'm hoping in a few months I can give a lecture to them, and I'm going to basically give our presentation tonight as what I'm going to tell them then.
Right.
I'm just going to say, look, here's the the Japanese internment camps. Here is the Great Society programs. Here is MK Ultra. There are just too many clear connections and relationships. You can see what happened. You guys were focused on and you were attacked, and your family structure was destroyed, and you're still being damaged to this very day. That's the point that I really want to hit home, is that, it isn't this historical assault that is, that we really want to focus on. It's what's going on today.
Well, there was no coincidence that they put a Japanese American as the Secretary of Transportation to lead one of the biggest PSYOPs in our lifetime, which is 9/11. Yeah. And that's Norman Yoshio Mineta from San Jose, California. Yeah. Says, don't worry, Arab people or Muslim people, I was an internee. You have nothing to fear.
Right.
No, that was definitely a staged event. But Jan, I would also, if I can make a pitch here, feed the brain with some Boule information, because you're going to see that there's an intersection between the so-called white secret society and the so-called black secret societies. It's really been an integrated America all along. It's just one unified power structure at the top that has been separating all the different groups, racially, ethnically, gender, lifestyle and all that. But
Well,
Boule, yeah.
That episode that you and I did, just plugging data into the brain database, was hugely popular.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, so we should do a separate episode on my show, just punching in data, and we can follow up on a lot of this stuff. So, people really liked that.
I enjoyed it, I think, the most of all.
I watched it. I thought it was great. It was
This should be a TV show.
Yeah, well, this is kind of a live TV show here.
Why don't you go visit your neighbor Oprah and ask her to put us on the Oprah Winfrey satellite channel? It's going to be called The Brain.
I don't know Oprah, but I have a good relationship with her guard dogs.
Okay. You're testing the perimeter on your security. You're testing your security.
Maybe toss the dog some steak.
Yeah.
All right. Now,
so we've got about 5 minutes left. So what do we want to go ahead, Darrell?
I just wanted to, since we were talking about Allen Ginsberg, I have a find for you here.
All right.
And you're going to run with this. Okay, I was looking at this book here, right? Your favorite guy, Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, dirty, slimy guy, yeah.
Spontaneous mind. So I was mining this for research, and he was undergoing therapy at the Langley Porter Clinic, an elite extension of the UC Berkeley Medical School. Okay.
Langley Porter Clinic, huh?
Langley Porter. So check that out. All your researchers out there, your subscribers, Langley Porter, and now it's part of the
Langley Porter or Quarter?
Porter, Porter.
Got it. Okay.
San Francisco. It's a psychiatric. It's state of the art. It's now part of the UC medical school. And
right. So
now this Ginsberg. Now, okay, but I also had to find, and this is what makes it interesting, is that as a child, Philip K. Dick, the writer, you know who he is, right?
Right.
Philip K. Dick. He also, as a child, was going to weekly sessions to the Langley Porter Clinic. He lived in Berkeley and went to San Francisco every week.
Guess who I run into all the time around town?
Who?
A woman by the name of Tessa Dick.
Dick, yeah, that was his former wife, one of his wives.
That was his fifth wife, and I run into her often at the post office. And I've actually contacted her.
All right.
And I interviewed her on Halloween night 3 years ago. But she just said that he was an agoraphobic and wasn't really aware of any of this stuff. And in the last 3 years, I've come across more information that suggests that she possibly, hi Tessa, was misleading me. But next time I bump into her at the post office, maybe I can get her on camera and do an interview with her,
Absolutely. The person who, where I got this information was from was one of his wives, many wives. Her name's Ann R. Dick. It's called The Search for Philip K. Dick. And I read the Tessa Dick book, by the way, as well. And she was only like 16 or 17 when they got married. So I don't think she had
but she was also a professor, though, later on. So
when she was with Dick, I think she was a teeny bopper or something. But the point I'm making is that the Langley Porter Clinic is really important to the track that you're following about psychedelics and mind control, especially in the Bay Area, Grateful Dead. So that's a name that I think needs to go into the brain. Furthermore, I think, this is speculation on my part, I think Philip Dick was probably an early example of what later became known as the Indigo Children. He was a genius as a child, and he was being tested very early on for possible intelligence work, just as people with extraordinary athletic abilities, such as Eldrick Tiger Woods, was tested very early on through his father, Earl Woods, who we know was in the intelligence area. So this is something for the future for your subscribers, because this is a group effort. It's not up to, people who are doing this full-time or near full-time. It's a community effort that we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All your subscribers, Jan, are important contributors to this effort. And I hope they will write you with information and leads and feedback.
And they do, and I hope they can do so, as well as contribute and support the show and go up to the
create
donation button there.
They need to create organizations of their own.
Absolutely.
There should be, they broke us apart. They shattered us. Let's recreate some camaraderie.
And they ghettoized us in the universities, which is the worst place to be for this type of discussion, ironically.
It is. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Darrell, do you have a website?
I have a Facebook account. It's Darrell Hamamoto, and I have a YouTube channel. It's called Professor Hamamoto, and I'm going to be posting more YouTube programs. I have no website, though.
All right, and so we'll have to get together soon and do another show. And ladies and gentlemen, please support all of us. Donate to each of our websites. Joe's website is postflaviana.org. I'm gnosticmedia.com. We can't do it without your direct support. And also, please support the network. But each of those is separate support. So be aware of that. Supporting one doesn't support the other.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.
Darrell, good seeing you.
Good seeing you,
everybody. And have a good night. Take
good
care.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world should be the focus of every person on our planet. The reason it is not is because people are kept distracted by the illusions and deceit propagated by the corporately controlled mainstream media. In recent years, the rise in truly informed, savvy researchers and journalists who have all taken to the air in various capacities has given rise to a new genre of media. We have seen the explosion of truly free and independent media, and thus the need to create an ethical live broadcast network that facilitated these brave and tireless souls became apparent. With a great amount of research and meticulous planning, Conscious Consumer Network was created. CCN is a first-of-its-kind broadcast network that is specifically dedicated to free and independent media with absolutely no government control, corporate sponsorship, or advertising. The live broadcast network runs full-time with an average of 25 shows and live broadcasts a week. The high-definition live stream is free to view and is accessible from any computer terminal with online access, including laptops, tablets, smartphones, and smart TVs. All shows are archived onto YouTube and are freely available to view in order to educate and inform as many as we can without imposing monetary limitations. CCN was successfully launched on the 1st of January 2015 and has gone from strength to strength as we have improved and increased the capacities and functionalities of the network, as well as an ever-rotating and improving lineup of content which is broadcast daily. CCN is blessed to be the home of some of the hardest-hitting, most cutting-edge, truly educational and informative materials. Catch interviews, reviews, and talk shows from the many different and beautiful perspectives from CCN's family of interviewers and broadcasters. Since the 1st of January 2015, we have produced over 800 shows. We have over 2 million YouTube minutes watched every month, and we have an average of 1 million hits a day on CCN's website. CCN is viewed in over 147 different countries and hosts broadcasters from 5 different continents. The time has now come to generate funding to keep CCN on the air for the duration of 2016. The total sum needed to continue broadcasting for 2016 is $60,000. This budget includes the replacement of computer equipment, the acquisition of secure servers, which are most needed as we keep getting hacked, plus the renewal of the broadcast license fee for 2016. This is a fraction of the annual budget used by mainstream media networks producing a similar quantity of content. This is what makes CCN so successful, unique, and accessible, is the ability to run a project of this size and reach on such minimal resources. CCN does not claim ownership over any of the material we produce and broadcast, as we firmly believe that information is the common heritage of all beings, and thus CCN belongs to you, the public, and it is up to you all to keep CCN going. CCN would like to thank those who have contributed to the network in the past with resources, content, information, time, and energy. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.